In this video, I'm going to go over the entire history of Ark, starting from the beginning, going through the major updates and spin-off games, everything you need to know down to the present day and the future of Ark with Ark 2. Anyway, let's get into it. Starting off is on May 11th, 2015 is when Ark Survival Evolved was first announced with the trailer right here, and it wouldn't come out when the trailer came out, but of course it was just announced to come out about a month later. And on June 2nd, 2015, Ark Survival Evolved would release on early access, but it would only be out for Steam on PC, so you could only play it on PCs. But the game was extremely different back then. The graphics were not as good. The game had a lot of missing biomes, like the island didn't have the Arctic, the swamp, or the Redwoods biome. A lot of the dinos didn't have their TLC updates, and a lot of the dinos we have now are just completely missing and they wouldn't be added. There was so much different with the original Ark. There was the old HUD. I've gone over a ton of these in my Things Only Original Ark Players Remember videos, but I can't really go over all the things that were missing in this original version of the game, but it was a lot different back when it first came out. But after that, the first major update for the game was on August 14th, 2015, where Survival of the Fittest came out. But when it did come out, it was only a mod. It would later become an official separate game, but we'll talk about that later when it happens. And if you don't know, Survival of the Fittest is basically like a battle royale mode for Ark Survival Evolved, and you can see it came out quite a long time ago. This was just the original version of it. On August 18th, 2015, the first new creature was added to the game, and it was the Gigantopithecus, except for this was before its TLC update, so it looked a little bit different than this. And also in this update, they added scuba gear, but they didn't have the leggings for the armor set yet. And on August 25th, 2015, the Doedicurus was added, so you can now actually harvest stone efficiently. And they also added the spray paint gun in this update, as well as the plant species X and seeds. Just 3 days later, on August 28th, they would add a new creature, the Mesopithecus, and they would add a new item, the smoke grenade. And after that, on September 11th, 2015, they added the Patchy, as well as they actually added rafts in this update, which I thought rafts were just always in the game when the game first came out, so I guess they weren't. They were added a few months after the game's release. But they also added the scuba leggings as well, so you gotta have the full set, or at least there's no gloves still, but you now can have leggings as well. This update also added the Mind Wipe tonic, so you'd be able to use your engram points on other things. And on September 24th, 2015, the Paracer was added, and just 4 days after that, on September 28th, there was a massive update that added the Arctic biome. It also added the swamp biome as well, so there were two huge new biomes, but also with this, they added new creatures. There was the Megaloceros and the Direwolf, which are both pretty good. Also, the Direwolf did not have its TLC yet. And then there was the Beelzebufo for the swamp biome. This update also added the fur set of armor, because of course you didn't really need fur before. And then there was the benches and chairs. On October 6th, the Quetzal would be added to the game. The thing is, it only had a platform saddle though, so you couldn't use a regular saddle on it. They also added the sniper rifle, or the fabricated sniper rifle in this update, as well as trank darts were added. These were another thing I just assumed were in the game since the beginning, but I guess trank darts were added in this update. And October 14th, the Mosasaurus was added to the game. And with a few other things, they finally added breeding to the game, which of course would change the game completely. And then they would also add a regular saddle for the Quetzal. On October 28th, 2015, the very first Fear Evolved event released, and with it they added the brand new Dodo Rex, which was a fan-like submission, and then they added a few skeleton creatures. They didn't add all the ones we have today. They added the Stego, Rex, Carno, Bronto, Trike, and Raptor. All of those bone variants, and of course they had all the Halloween stuff. I'm not going to go over every single event that's ever happened in this video, because that would make this video kind of redundant, but I'm just going to go over the main events, of course this being one of them. On November 5th, the Giga would be added, except for this one would have like 100,000 health in the wild, so it's kind of crazy. And then they also added swords and shields in this update. And after that, on November 12th, they added the anglerfish to the game. They also added the Kairuku, and then they added the catapults and minigun turrets. Also in this update, they added the fur TLC pass thing, so basically before all furry or feathery creatures just didn't look feathery at all. If you know what it looked like before, then you'll definitely know this change, or remember this change. On November 21st, the Compy would be added, as well as wall torches. This update also added the rocket turret, and it also added sea mines as well. And then the next update on November 25th was the first turkey trial event. This one was the Thanksgiving event, and it allowed you to respawn the Dodo Rex as it tamed, as well as you could actually find the super turkeys, which were like insanely powerful, and if you killed them you got wishbones, which you could use to get things for the event. On December 1st, the Oviraptor would be added, as well as bunk beds, tables, the industrial cooker, and the ghillie suit as well. And after that, on December 16th, 2015, the game would officially release on Xbox, meaning it's finally available for consoles, at least just the Xbox for now. Shortly after, on December 22nd, 2015, the Winter Wonderland event would begin, which is the first Christmas event. Also, one fun fact about this is the entire map got covered in snow, which I don't think has ever happened again. I really wish it would. This update also had raptor claws, which would drop presents around the map, and you could open them and get coal, which you could use to craft certain like skins and stuff, as well as just a bunch of other items as well. And on December 31st, 2015, the very last update of 2015, the Procoptodon was added. The first major update of 2016 was on January 15th, 2016, which added the Dung Beetle, the Dimetrodon, and the beer barrels, as well as beer. And later that month, on the 28th, the Gallimimus was added to the game, as well as the greenhouse building pieces, so you could actually have the greenhouse effect. Then they added the electric prod, which is probably one of the most useless things for PvE anyway. And then they added the riot set of armor, so there was a new tier of riot, and with this they changed it to our flak armor was now crafted in the smithy instead of the fabricator. On February 7th, the Terror Bird was added, as well as the grappling hooks. So not a ton in this update, but it was a pretty good update with the grappling hooks. And on February 24th, the Beaver was added, or the Castroids. So we had another good way of harvesting wood. They also added the handcuffs in this update. On March 15th, 2016, Survival of the Fittest officially released, meaning it was no longer a mod for the game and was its own standalone game, except for it only was on PC. And on March 26, 2016, there were two new caves added. First off was the Snow Cave with the Artifact of the Strong, and then the other one was the Swamp Cave. On April 2nd, 2016, the Woolly Rhino was added, as well as the Dunkleosteus and the Eurypterid. Later that month, on the 20th, the Dire Bear was added, and the Manta as well. This update also introduced the Chemistry Bench and Cannons as well. This update also had the first boss arena, being the Broodmother boss arena, as before the Broodmother would just summon in the world at the Obelisk Terminal. On Star Wars Day, they also added the Lystrosaur, the Arthroplora, and the Saber-toothed Salmon. With this, they also introduced fish meat as well. Before, fish just gave raw meat. And then they also added the Bolo, probably one of the most game-changing items in the game. This update also added the Megapithecus arena. On May 17th, 2016, the first ever new map came to the game, and it was the Center. It was a branded map that got brought to official. It was the first of the maps to do so. The Center was a little bit different when it first came out, as it didn't have the Redwoods biome, but it was really cool for the time, as some of the biomes and caves and stuff were just completely different and way better than we'd ever seen before. This map didn't introduce any new creatures though, and would be the only map to not introduce a new creature, but of course it was kind of normal at the time. Shortly after that, on June 2nd, 2016, the Diplodocus was added to the game, as well as the Leeches. Also in this update, they added the Alpha Mosasaur, and then they added the training dummies. This update was also the 1-year anniversary for Ark, and it added the Dragon Arena. On June 13th, 2016, they announced Primal Survival, which would basically be play as a dino, but this never ended up actually coming out, even though I think it would have been really cool if it did. There is a trailer for it and everything, where you basically just take the role of some dinosaur and play as it. It looked really fun, but we never got it. On June 23rd, 2016, the Redwoods biome was added to the game, and it was only on the island, as well as they added the Titanosaur with the giant Titanosaur platform saddle. So they also had the Ballista turret as well. With the Ballista turret, they also added the chain bolas as well, so you could use those. They also had the tree platform. Since the Redwoods is brand new, they had the wood and metal tree platforms. This update also introduced the tree sap taps, as well as the rope ladder. It also added the gas mask, and finally the sweet veggie cakes, so quite a big update. The next update on July 28th added the Redwoods biome to the center, which added that huge other island to the map which wasn't there before, so this was quite a huge expansion to the center map, as well as the Pelagornis and the Allosaurus were added. This update also added the spiral staircases and the industrial grinder, as well as it introduced fishing and fishing rods. After that, there was a surprise update on September 1st, 2016, and Scorched Earth was added to the game. There was no trailer before this. They just kind of dropped the trailer and Scorched Earth came out along with it. And it was a $20 DLC with a bunch of new stuff. There was the new map, which of course was Scorched Earth, that added a ton of new creatures. There were wyverns, deathworms, jerboas, the mantis, the morellatops, the jugbug, the rock golem, vultures, Lymantria, all kinds of different stuff, as well as there was tons of new items like the flamethrower, chainsaw, desert armor. There's the flame arrows, the flamethrower, the rocket homing missile, the whip, cluster grenades, boomerangs, all kinds of stuff, as well as there was the Adobe structure set, so we got a new structure set in the game. And there was just so much to this DLC. It was a whole desert themed one, and it was pretty awesome. That's not even everything that was introduced with the Scorched Earth DLC, but also this was the first story map to be released, or I guess the island technically was, but this was the first new story map to come out, because before there was just the island in the center, so this was the third map in the game. Not too long after, on September 12th, the Pterojapo was added to the game, as well as the Archaeopteryx, and also night vision goggles were added in this update. On October 21st, 2016, the Calicatherium and the Capra were added, as well as the Diplocaulus. Also in this update, the procedurally generated arcs were added, even though I don't even know if they work, and I don't think anyone's ever used these before. And then there's the Explorer Notes were finally added to the game, so now you could find Explorer Notes around the map and get the XP bonus from them. On October 28th was the beginning of Fear Evolved 2, and Fear Evolved 2 had a lot added to it. There was the new Dodo Wyvern, which was on Scorched Earth you could find. It was absolutely massive, as well as they added the new Zombie Wyverns. And then there was a few new bone creatures, including the Bone Wyvern, Jerboa, Quetzal, and Giga. On November 24th, 2016, the Megalosaurus was added, as well as the Achatina and the Pachyrhinoceros, but this update was pretty massive because it added mutations, which allowed you to get color and stat mutations while breeding. On December 6th, 2016, Ark Survival Evolved officially came to PlayStation 4, and on December 23rd, the Winter Wonderland 2 event started. Wasn't very much different, but it also had a bunch of things that added to the game, like Troodons, Pegos, and Therizinosaurus, as well as the Nidaria, and the Tusoteuthis. This update also added the underwater caves as well, so quite a big Winter Wonderland update. That was it for the updates of 2016, and in 2017 was quite a big year for Ark. Starting with January 30th was the first major update that added the Ovis, Parlovia, and Baryonyx, as well as the Basilosaurus. It also introduced tech for the first time, as there was no tech items before this. There was the full set of tech armor, and introduced the tech transmitter, tech saddle, and the tech replicator. As well as there were hairstyles introduced in the game as well, with the scissors, and there was the lance too in this update. On February 27th, the Microraptor was added to the game, as well as the Thylacoleo, and then there's the Force Field, Electric Eels, and the Ammonite. Also, one thing about this update is this was the first update I remember, because this update came out right after I started playing, so it's kind of cool. On March 31st, the Iguanodon and the Equus, as well as the Ichthyornis were added. Then they added the Elite Sickness in the same update as well. This update also added underwater bases to the game for the first time, and there was the tech generator. This was also the update that added the brand new UI, so it completely changed what the UI looked like from what it used to look like, and I'm still not sure about this change. I do like the new UI, but there's something about the old one too, I'm not sure. Let me know which ones you guys prefer. The next major update was on May 5th that added the Kentro Daedon, Giant Queen Bee, as well as it added the Leoplorodon, the Megalodon Tech Saddle, and the Alpha Megalodon, and then it also added the Cloning Chamber as well. This update also added the Tech Turret to the game, but on May 30th, a bunch of new creatures got added: the Hyenodon, Megalania, Hesperornis, Megatherium, and the Eutyrannus. This update also introduced the motor boats, or I guess the just metal version of the raft that goes on gasoline, and then this update also added harpoon guns as well as trank spear bolts, so you can trank things out underwater. Something important to note about this update is this was pretty much the last major update before Ark went into its full release, which means this was pretty much the last of these kind of updates that added new creatures and new items at the same time. We've never really gotten an update that's added this many creatures that aren't DLC related since then. On June 12th, 2017, a brand new map came out for Ark Survival Evolved, and it was called Ragnarok. It was a brand new custom map that was a mod map, came to official, and this one was awesome as it combined elements from the island as well as Scorched Earth as well. So this one also had access to Scorched Earth DLC items and introduced the new creatures like the Griffin as well as the Ice Wyvern variant. It had the mini bosses like the Ice Wyvern or the Ice Worm Queen. This overall was just a fantastic map, and it was the biggest one yet. It absolutely dwarfed all the other maps in sizes. That's the only thing that kind of sucked about this is it only released on PC, and it wouldn't release on consoles until about 2 or 3 months later. And also, half the map was released when it first came out, so you couldn't even go to the desert area when it first came out. On August 29th, 2017, the game officially released. It was no longer in early access. There was also this pre-order bonus, as you can see on screen right here. If you pre-ordered the game before August 29th, you would get this bonus where you'd get the entire Explorer notebook with all of the Explorer notes of the dinos with this little necklace and a map of the island. Me personally, I'm super upset I didn't buy this. I mean, it makes sense. I was like 10 at the time and I already had the game, so why would I pre-order it for 60 bucks when I already had it? But I'm still mad that I didn't do that. I wish I would have, because this Explorer note thing is awesome. I wish I could get it somehow. This update also added a bunch of different tech skins, all that cost $1 each. They had the Mosasaur, the Trike, and the Quetzal, Parasaur, Raptor, all that other stuff. And then you could buy these when they dropped. This update also introduced the Otter and the Phoenix. The Phoenix was added to Scorched Earth, and the Otter was added to all maps. And the Otter was the last map, or the last creature to be added to all maps for about, I'd say 4 or 5 years. We'll get to that later in this video when the next creature was added, but it's a long gap. This update also added the Overseer boss fight, which was quite an epic boss fight, and also added the first cutscene to the island. On September 1st, 2017, the Aberration announcement trailer dropped. We had a little countdown that was put inside of the trailer for the base game launching, and once that countdown ended, we got this trailer, and it was pretty awesome. And Aberration was said to come out in October, which of course didn't happen. But instead, on December 12th, 2017, Aberration would officially drop on all platforms, and this is one of the best DLCs ever in my opinion, and according to a lot of people, I think this is a lot of people's favorite DLC, so this was quite an exciting moment for Ark. There was just so much that was added. There was a ton of new creatures like the Basilisk, Rock Drakes, Reapers, Ravagers. You had the Roll Rats too. You had the Rockwell boss fight at the end. There was tons of new items too, like the wingsuit, the zip lines and stuff you had the hazard suits, all kinds of different stuff, climbing picks. This map just had so much to it, and it was really awesome. Aberration was also the second paid DLC map for $20, and of course it was the 4th map to be added and the 2nd story map to be added to the game. And overall, like I said, I think it ended up being pretty great, and was definitely a great way to end off 2017. The first major update of 2018 was the first ever TLC update. This basically just remastered a bunch of creatures in the game, making them a lot better, look a lot better, and have some new abilities. They did the Gigantopithecus, Direwolf, Direbear, Procoptodon, and the Rex. On March 15th, 2018, the game would be officially announced on mobile, but it would only be in closed beta for iOS. And on March 21st, the second TLC update would be released with the Raptor, Sarco, Trike, Parasaur, RG, and the Spino all getting a TLC. This is probably going to be one of my favorite TLC updates, especially with the RG, because the RG just became so much more useful. But on March 22nd, 2018, Ark Park would have released, which is basically a VR spin-off game of Ark. It had been announced about a year earlier, but this was the official release of it. Just 3 days later, on March 25th, 2018, Pixark would release, which was another spin-off game, except for this one was basically a combination of Ark and Minecraft. It had stuff from Minecraft, like blocks and placing stuff, but you also had the dinosaurs and all that from Ark. Pretty much the same animations and stuff with the new Minecraft-looking models. And on June 14th, Ark Mobile would officially come out on Android and iOS. And a day after that, on June 15th, the Archaeology event would drop. Now this one had a huge countdown. I think it was about 2 weeks, and they had this as the background, except for these dinosaurs were blacked out, and everyone thought that these were going to be 3 new dinos going to be added to the game, but we were going to get the Stygimoloch, the Brachii, and the other one like the Styracosaurus or whatever, but we didn't get those. They just added them as skins, and this event was extremely controversial because of course they kind of just misled the community into thinking we could get new creatures when they were actually just skins. This update also introduced the first tech creature, the Tech Rex, and also started Extinction Chronicles, which would be an event where they would add a new tech creature every single month leading up to the release of Extinction. After the backlash from the Archaeology event, Wildcard would release the Extinction teaser trailer, assumingly just to calm down the community and give them something. But I mean, this trailer was pretty sick, and I remember I was insanely hyped about Extinction after watching this. But yeah, this was just a teaser trailer, and they announced that it would be coming out on November 6th, which meant there would be a 6-month gap in between, which nowadays doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but I remember everyone was freaking out that they had to wait 6 months for a new DLC to come out. So for the upcoming months leading up to the release of Extinction, the Extinction Chronicles updates would come out, releasing new tech dinos, with starting out on July 17th with the Tech Stego. These updates would also add new Explore Notes as well. On August 14th, there was the Tech Raptor that was added to the game. And then after that, the next one on September 18th, 2018 was the Parasaur, or the Tech Parasaur. And then finally on October 16th, 2018 was the Tech Quetzal. On November 6, 2018, Extinction would finally release, making it the third and final story map, for now anyway, until they decided to change their mind. But this DLC added a ton of new features to the game. It added a ton of new creatures like the Snow Owls, the Gotchas, you had the Managarmers, you had the Titans, which were pretty massive, the Gas Bags. There was so much creatures, so much to do, as well as there was a bunch of new features like the orbital supply drops. You had the scouts and enforcers as well. I guess I forgot to mention those. And when it comes to new items, they had a bunch of new stuff as well, like the taxidermies, you have the tech bridges. But mainly the thing that they added was the cryopods, which for this time were exclusive to Extinction, but would later be changed. And I'll mention that when that happens. But the cryopods were a massive addition to the game as well. You also had the mechs as well, which were pretty game changing, especially for PvP. But yeah, this DLC was absolutely massive when it dropped. Also on June 13th is when it would come out on consoles, as it got delayed literally last day. I remember because I was a PlayStation player and I was so excited for Extinction. Literally the day before it came out, they're like, oh yeah, it's not coming out on November 6th for consoles. Yeah, that was really annoying, but this is when it did come out, on November 13th. On November 30th, Ark Survival Evolved would come to Nintendo Switch, except for it was missing a lot of the maps because the Nintendo Switch didn't really have the hardware to run most of them. And then on December 22nd, a new spin-off game, Atlas, would come out, which is basically like a pirate version of Ark. It had a lot of the same like assets and all that stuff, which is why I included it, because it's a lot like Ark, except for just with pirates in it. Moving on to 2019, and the first major update was on March 5th, and this was a pretty big update, as this was the Homestead update, which completely changed the building in Ark and made it way easier. It also added a bunch of new building pieces, like the triangle pieces, and the triangle ceilings, the stairs. It also added dedicated storages and allowed you to pick up structures for the first time. It just had a 30-second cooldown for when you had to do it, and then if you didn't pick it up in the 30 seconds, then it would be over. This update also rehauled the entire kibble system to make it a lot easier, and so instead of having to have every single dino in the game for kibble, now you only need a few. On June 18th, 2019, a new custom map would come to the game called Valguero. It was basically kind of like Ragnarok, except for it had an ice wyvern cave, it had an aberration area, and the new chalk cliffs biome. So this was a pretty cool map overall. It also introduced the new Deinonychus as well. This update also added cryopods to the base game, so they were no longer just an Extinction exclusive, which of course was quite a good change. On July 2nd, 2019, the first ever Summer Bash event would start, which of course they had never really had one of these before. And then on August 18th, 2019, the Ark Genesis Season Pass was announced. They announced 2 new maps, Genesis Part 1 and 2. Part 1 coming out in December 2019 and Part 2 coming out in winter 2020. Now reading those dates now, knowing what they actually are, is pretty funny. But yeah, they also released the Genesis Pass, which was like $30, and you got Genesis Part 1 and 2. On October 22nd, 2019, they had Fear Evolved 3. Fear Evolved had finally returned, as they didn't do it in 2017 and 2018. So it was nice to finally have that back. And then on December 17th, they would start the Winter Wonderland event. And this one was important because it first added chibis to the game, so you could now collect the chibis. The first update of 2020 was on February 25th, and it added the Genesis Part 1 DLC. This DLC came with a bunch of stuff. It came with a bunch of new creatures, the Magmasaur, Bloodstalker, Ferox, Space Whale, and the Mega Chelon. It also came with a bunch of new items like the Tech Grenade Launcher, the Tech Claws, the Mining Drill, which is super useful. Then you had the other ones like the Fish Nets, and then you could also get some other things like the electronic binoculars. One thing that was new to Genesis Part 1 and just the game in general was the missions. You could now do missions to unlock gear and just to progress through the game, as you didn't need artifacts anymore to get to the final boss. Instead, you just had to complete a certain amount of missions. You also teleported between the biomes instead, so there's 5 mini biomes that were like basically put together into one map that you could teleport between. So there was a bunch of new features in this DLC, and not everyone enjoyed some of it, as some of the missions would basically make it to where you can't build in certain areas on servers, so that made it kind of annoying, and the mission system was still kind of new, so that kind of made it a little bit difficult. But I still think Genesis Part 1 can be pretty fun, especially with some of the new creatures, but it's not one of the best, at least according to the community. And the next update was on June 11th. You'll notice the gaps between updates are now starting to get pretty big. But on June 11th, they added Crystal Isles, which is a brand new map, and it had actually been a mod map since 2016 and was a fan favorite, so it was really cool to see this one come to the official game. Except for this one only released on PC, and it didn't come to console until like a few months later. Of course, we'll get into that, but kind of sucks that they split the release date. This update also added the Tropio, but it added the Tropio to consoles as well on the same day, basically apologizing for not releasing Crystal Isles, so you were able to access the Tropio, which is exclusive on PC to Crystal Isles, but on console you can get it on any other map. This update was also the 5th anniversary for Ark, and on August 25th, 2020 is when Crystal Isles would officially come to PS4 and Xbox One, so this was really nice to see that it finally came to console, even though it did take a while, and like I said, the gaps between updates are pretty large now. On October 22nd, 2020, Fear Evolved came back with Fear Evolved 4, and the reason I mentioned this one because it added the ghost creatures to the game, which of course have been in every Fear Evolved update since then, and they're pretty cool. There's a bunch of different ghost creatures that they added in this update. On November 7th, 2020 was a pretty big update, as it was the 3rd TLC update, TLCing the Stego and the Mammoth. It also added the Taming HUD, so you could now see all the dinos you were taming, and you could track them as well, which is pretty useful. This all happened during the Extra Life 24-hour live stream, which during that stream they also released or announced Genesis Part 2 with the teaser trailer and a bunch of teasers showing off what it would be like, and they wouldn't come out for quite a while after that though. On December 11th, 2020, the Ark animated series would be announced with a small trailer showing it, but that didn't really show off too much. And on December 12th, 2020, at the Game Awards, Ark 2 was announced. They had a cinematic trailer for it, and of course, it looked pretty cool, and they put a release date of like December 2022. Now, obviously, that didn't happen, as it's 2024, and this game's still not out yet, but, you know, that's what they said anyway, and of course, that never happened, and it's been delayed since. But you can kind of see what they were going for here, where on like the other planet where Genesis Part 2 ending up. There's not really too much to say though, because we still don't know a lot about Ark 2, but this is just the announcement or cinematic trailer for it with Vin Diesel in it as well. On May 28th, 2021, the Ultimate Survivor Edition would be released, which was basically a version of the game that had all of the DLCs for about like $50. I think it's even cheaper now, but this was like the main release for Ark Survival Evolved, the Ultimate Edition, which was pretty cool. Also, you notice the like jumps between updates are pretty large now, so they didn't really update the game for 2020 between 2022 up to like Ark Ascended's release, so the updates are going to be pretty sporadic, and there's not really too much that went on in these years, which kind of sucks. On June 3rd, 2021, Genesis Part 2 would finally come out. Keep in mind the original release date for this was in winter of 2020, so like this is like 6 or 7 months later, but it finally came out. This was the final story map for Ark Survival Evolved, and would be the ending to the Ark storyline. It introduced a bunch of new creatures, including the Astrodelphus, the Exomech, the Maywing, the Noglin, the Shadowmane, the Striders, and the Voidworms. This DLC also introduced a bunch of new items to the game, a lot of them being quite game-changing, including the net projectiles. Then they had the egg hatchery or the egg incubators, which were super useful, as well as the net projectiles. There was the tech crop plots, the loadout mannequins, the hover sail, the surveillance camera, ammo boxes. They added miniguns, they added the tech bow in this update, the tech pistol, the exomex, and the jar of pitch. And then they also added the tech canteen, which was super useful. They had new resources like mutagen, which you could use to enhance your creatures. There was just a ton in this DLC for the final one, and this map had a ton of DLC creatures from past DLCs. That's a lot of DLCs in one sentence, but yeah, this map had an absolute ton in it. But it wasn't exactly well received, or it wasn't like hated on, but it wasn't a fan favorite either, mainly because you also spawned in with a tech suit, which made the DLC super easy, which also just made it not really as fun because you could survive super easily. On the other hand, I think it did have a good impact because of course it added a lot of fan favorite creatures like the Maywing. There's the Shadowmane too, which is kind of overpowered, so maybe that one's not as loved, but at the same time it's a really cool creature, so I don't know. This was a cool DLC, wasn't one of the best, but at the same time it wasn't the worst either. I think it was still pretty good. Also important to mention, it brought back the mission system from Genesis Part 1, so we had the missions, except for I think they were improved upon quite a lot. Definitely learned from the mistakes of Genesis Part 1 and improved on these. It also brought like the HLNA shop and all that stuff. On June 25th, 2021, Lost Island was announced. It was going to be a brand new custom map. It was only like 30% done at the time, so Wildcard like ended up helping finish a lot of it. But this map wouldn't come out for quite a while. This thing also had the first ever creature vote announced, which the winner of course was the Dinopithecus, but this was the first of many creature votes to come. But later that year, on November 7th, on the Extra Life event, they would announce Fjordur. So even before Lost Island came out, they announced Fjordur to be the last custom map to come out for Ark Survival Evolved. And with it, they also had the second creature vote, which would result in the Desmodus winning that vote and being added to the game. Also, the Carcharodontosaurus had lost to second place to both of these creatures, I believe. So that's the reason that they said they'd end up adding that later down the road. On December 14th, 2021, Lost Island finally came out, and fun fact, this one was one of the only maps to actually be released on time, because they said it would come out on December 14th, and it did come out on December 14th, and didn't get delayed for any consoles or anything like that, so that was kind of cool. But this map was really large. It was one of the biggest maps, and it had a bunch of DLC content from other maps added to it. You could unlock all engrams on this map, including ones from Genesis Part 2, and also 3 new creatures were added with this map. The Cinemacrops, the Dinopithecus, which was the creature vote winner, and also the Amargasaurus was added. About 6 months later was the next update, and it was on June 12th, 2022, which added Fjordur. This map was one of the community favorites when it was added, and still is one of the community favorite maps. It's one of the best maps added in recent years, and it's quite awesome. You could travel between the different realms. It's a super unique map. All the biomes are ones you've pretty much never seen before. They've all got their unique spin on them. Also, this map introduced 3 new creatures, the Desmodus, the Andrewsarchus, and the Fedora Hawk. Overall, this map was really awesome, and it was definitely a great send-off for Ark Survival Evolved. Also, that same day, we got a second trailer for Ark 2, and this one was, I guess, also kind of a cinematic trailer, but we got to see some more into the game, like some up-close shots that looked really good. We got to see the dodo as well, with a really cool-looking motto. And then we also got to see the raptors, which I'm assuming are the raptors or some type of raptor as well. This trailer was just kind of nice to see the progress on Ark 2, but it's also the last trailer we've gotten since then. And they announced a new release date, which would be 2023, and once again, obviously that did not happen as it's 2024 and the game's still not out yet, so yeah. On October 5th, 2022, it was announced that the Ultimate Edition for Ark Survival Evolved would be coming to Nintendo Switch, which meant all of the DLCs would be added to Nintendo Switch as well, which before they didn't really have any, so they added those over a period of years, and I think just recently they finally added Genesis Part 2 to it. And then on November 5th, 2022, the Carcharodontosaurus was added to the game. This was added with the Extra Life event stream. They just announced it and then released it on that day. Well, they had announced it before, but they actually showed it off in a trailer and stuff. And then also in that stream, they announced that they'd be bringing back Survival of the Fittest, except for this time they'd be bringing it to consoles because it never came to console before, and it would also be crossplay, but that didn't end up happening, at least not on Ark Survival Evolved. And yeah, it was nice to see that the Ark Survival the Fittest would finally coming back, because it was kind of dead and they kind of just gave up on it. So it was really cool to see that it was actually coming back. And on December 16th, the new story features would be added to the game. So Scorched Earth got a cutscene finally, after years of people asking and us thinking they would never come. They finally added a cutscene to Scorched Earth. Also in this update, Rockwell got voice lines voiced by David Tennant. He had him in Genesis Part 2, but now they went back and retroactively added the voice lines to Rockwell. And Explorer Notes now had voiceover lines for Helena and Rockwell. And on December 23rd, 2022, Survival of the Fittest would officially release. And now there was the new mode of it, and you could play it, and it was pretty dope. Moving into 2023, and on March 31st, Ark Ascended was announced. It was announced to come out in later, I think August of 2023, and it would be bundled with Ark 2, and then you'd have to pay for the DLCs later. But they ended up changing that, and they decided to make all the DLCs free instead and not bundle Ark 2 with it, so they made some changes there. Also, just want to mention this because it seems like a lot of people have just straight up forgotten that they said this, but they said we plan to release a new canonical story expansion for Ark Ascended that would be in Q4 2023, which obviously didn't happen, but I'm assuming this DLC is still coming, and it says that this DLC is going to have 4 new creatures. So new story map obviously coming at some point. They announced with this announcement that still isn't out yet, so it could be later this year, but this is the history video, not the speculation for future stuff video, but I just wanted to mention that. And on June 2nd, 2023 was the final update for Ark Survival Evolved, and it added the Rhynionatha, which is one of the creature voted creatures. It was originally going to come to Ark Ascended, but they decided to add it to Ark Survival Evolved on the island instead. So yeah, that was the final update for Ark Survival Evolved. On October 25th, 2023, Ark Survival Ascended would finally release. And of course, it got delayed by about 2 months, and it only came out on PC to start with, but it was pretty awesome, and it would come out in December for console. Great things about this is they finally introduced crossplay for when consoles eventually did come out. There were cross-platform mods, so people on console could finally use mods. Of course, obviously, they remastered the entire game, making it look way better. The graphics being way better. It just looks absolutely phenomenal, and they made a ton of quality of life changes. There's just so much that they changed with this. Obviously, I made a video 150 changes, so there's quite a lot of changes, and I can't go over all of them here, but they did quite a lot. There's wild babies and stuff now. There's just a ton. On November 21st, 2023, Ark Ascended will release for Xbox, and on November 30th, it would release for PS5. On December 21st, 2023, the first Winter Wonderland event for Ark Ascended would start, and the events were a bit different with Ark Ascended, as now they were mods that you had to install, which makes it to where you can play these events any time of the year that you want to, which I think is kind of nice, but it also is kind of weird that it's now mod separate, but I guess it makes sense. On February 13th, 2024, premium mods were introduced to Ark Survival Ascended. Now this specific premium mod I'm showing on the screen wasn't out yet, neither was the center, but it's the only premium mod I have. Well, I have a couple, but this is one of the few ones I do have, so that's why I'm showing this footage. But yeah, premium mods were added. They were basically paid mods that you could have, and half of the money would go to the mod developers, and the other half would be distributed between Wildcard and the mod distributor, which is CurseForge. On February 28th, 2024, the Gigantoraptor was added, which was originally voted to be on Ragnarok, but they decided to change it to the center, and then the center got delayed, so they added it to the base game instead. Now it's on the island, and I think it's on the center as well. On March 21st, 2024, the Ark animated series finally released. It had been about 3.5 years since they announced it, so it's nice it finally came out. It came out on Paramount Plus and was only in, I think, the US and certain countries like that. It was only in certain countries and would be later globally released at a later date. On April 1st, 2024, the first map for Ark Survival Ascended would release, and it was the remaster of Scorched Earth. With this, they basically rehauled the entire map, making it look way better than it did before. They added some new creatures like the Phaselosuchus, which was a community voted creature, and then they added the new Bob's Tall Tale DLC, which was a pack that had 3 DLCs. That 2 of them aren't out yet as of making this video, but the first one was for Scorched Earth. And the Scorched Earth one introduced a ton of new items and creatures. First off, it introduced the Oasisaur, and it also added stuff like shovels, carts, trains, and even more stuff, the skins as well. On April 19th, 2024, the Ark animated series would be released globally, even though I don't think it's released in every single country, but it was released in a lot of them, so most people would finally be able to actually watch the show. And on May 3rd, 2024, we got the announcement that the Ark Editions creatures, which is a very popular mod that adds very well-made creatures to the game, would be coming to official, and they would slowly be releasing the creatures over the year. And on May 17th, 2024, the first of those updates came, with the Ceratosaurus and Zafactinus being added to the game. And on June 4th, 2024, the Center finally released. Even though it had been gone through many delays and was originally going to come out in February, it got eventually released on June 4th. Now that we got it, it's been quite a controversial update. I think it looks quite great, and a lot of the areas are improved. There were some changes people didn't really like about how the fact that they changed the volcanic area to a jungle-looking biome. Some people say that it kind of looks like the entire map is with sandstone, even though I'm not entirely sure if I agree with that. I think it looks better overall. But one of the main controversial changes was the introduction of the Pyroman. There was a $5 DLC creature, the brand new creature to the game, which I guess would also not just be exclusive to the Center, but would also be on Scorched Earth as well. The Center would also introduce the brand new Shastasaurus and the Submarine Saddle, which I think were both pretty cool creatures, even though they are quite late game. And later that month, on June 17th, 2024, the Club Ark would be introduced, which is basically a series of mini games and stuff you could play with, a hub of players you could interact with, or you could play it in single player and unlock rewards, cosmetics, and other stuff like that. I actually hadn't played it until I was doing the footage for this video, and I did this train heist mission. It was actually kind of fun. Wasn't expecting to have fun with it, but I don't know, maybe I just underestimated the Club Ark. And on the same update, they added the Power Rangers collab, which was like $10, I think, and you could get a bunch of the Power Rangers skins and cosmetics. On July 17th, 2024, the Dinosuchus was added to the game, which was the third of the Ark Editions creatures to be added to the game, and there's still more to come. That is all of the updates for Ark Ascended, and there's going to be Ark Aberration on September 4th, even though I'm not confirming that, as they tend to delay updates quite a lot, so it might not come out on September 4th, but you know, it's in the roadmap, so I thought I'd throw it in here at the end. So that is the entire history of Ark Survival Evolved and Ascended. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I made sure only to talk about the major updates, as if I were to go over every single update in its entirety, which most of them are just bug fixes, this would take forever. I also didn't include, like, you know, all of the events, because there's a lot of them, and a lot of them just didn't really matter too much because they were just like colors and a few skins, so I did not include those. But other than that, that's the entire history. Thanks for watching. If you did like this video, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe. Thanks for watching, and bye.